Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting, how this tech, usually when you think about it, you think self-driving cars and robots, how AI is being used to help people get access to justice.
Yeah, it really is kind of amazing to see this cutting edge technology being applied to something as fundamental as, fairness in the legal system.
Absolutely. And, we hear this term all the time, justice gap. But what does that even mean? Like for someone who's not a lawyer, what are we talking about here?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine facing a serious legal problem like an eviction or a custody battle, and you can't afford a lawyer or even understand how the system works.
Yeah. No.
That's the reality for millions of people, especially those with, you know, lower incomes.
It's a pretty daunting thought. And I mean, are there any numbers that really kind of highlight how big of a problem this is?
There are, and they're pretty startling. Studies show that 92%, a staggering 92% of low-income households who are dealing with a serious legal issue, they don't get adequate legal help. So they're left to navigate this complex system on their own, and often with really, really high stakes.
So today we're going to be exploring this, the challenges of this system, but also how AI is stepping in to potentially bridge this gap. So we'll see how it's being used in real-world situations and uncover the possibilities and maybe some hiccups along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to start by looking at, the current state of access to justice, especially here in the U.S., where the need is pretty significant.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. What does that actually look like on the ground? What are some of the biggest challenges people are facing?
Well, I think one major issue is just the sheer volume of cases that public defenders have to handle. They're just overloaded with work, sometimes dealing with 2 or even 3 times the recommended workload.
Oh, wow.
Imagine trying to effectively represent that many people while ensuring everyone gets a fair shot.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly overwhelming for those lawyers, but also this isn't just about overworked lawyers. This has real consequences for people's lives, right? Like I remember reading about that situation in Oregon where they had a severe shortage of public defenders.
You're thinking about the crisis last year where over 700 defendants didn't have legal representation.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not a small number. These are people facing criminal charges, and many of them were just left with no one to defend their rights.
It's hard to even grasp that number, 700 people without legal representation. So what happened in those cases? Did the system just grind to a halt?
Well, a lot of cases were delayed, but the courts were actually forced to dismiss nearly 300 cases,
Mm.
including some felonies, simply because there weren't enough lawyers.
Wow.
And it really raises the question, what does justice even mean when the system designed to uphold it is this strained?
It almost feels like the scales are tipping in the wrong direction there. And it seems like civil cases aren't doing much better. Like, what are some of the challenges we see there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you look at things like, evictions or debt collection lawsuits, which can be just incredibly disruptive to people's lives, the situation's pretty grim.
Yeah.
Studies show that over 70% of people facing debt collection lawsuits, they didn't have a lawyer.
Wow.
And when you're up against someone who does have legal representation, it often feels like an uphill battle.
It's that whole David and Goliath scenario, but with real life consequences.
Exactly.
It's like the deck's already stacked against those who can't afford that help.
And then, as if things weren't challenging enough, the pandemic, while kind of forcing some positive innovation, it also really magnified a lot of these existing problems.
Like the shift to online courts, I remember, was supposed to make things more accessible, but actually ended up creating barriers for some folks, right?
Exactly. While remote hearings were helpful for some, they also highlighted this digital divide. Those without reliable internet access or the tech skills to navigate these online platforms were essentially excluded from participating fully in their own cases. So imagine trying to defend yourself in court from your phone with a spotty connection.
It seems like a cruel irony that the attempt to modernize the system ended up leaving some even further behind. And of course, we can't talk about access to justice without acknowledging the disparities that exist. Certain communities bear a heavier burden of these challenges, right?
Absolutely. Data consistently shows that Black and Latino renters face higher eviction rates. And then there are these legal deserts, often in rural areas, where people just lack access to legal aid or even a lawyer within a reasonable distance.
So you're facing a legal issue and there's literally no one to turn to for miles.
It's a pretty grim reality, and the system's overwhelmed, the need is immense, especially for those who are already disadvantaged. You'd think there would be stronger support systems in place. There are support systems, with many dedicated people and organizations working tirelessly to try to close this gap. But even those efforts, they're facing some pretty significant obstacles.
Let's break down some of those, those traditional solutions like legal aid, pro bono work,
Yeah.
and why they're often struggling to keep up with the demand.
Legal aid organizations, they're on the front lines of this fight for access to justice. They provide essential services to those who can't afford a lawyer.
Right.
But they're constantly grappling with a lack of funding. They're often forced to turn away eligible clients simply because they don't have the resources to handle their cases.
Yeah, and I recall reading that the Legal Services Corporation, the LSC, requested a significant amount of funding just last year in 2022 just to try and keep up.
They requested over $1 billion. And while they did receive a funding increase, it was far less than what was needed to truly address the gap. So sadly, they had to turn away about half the people who came to them for help.
It's tough to imagine being in a situation where you desperately need legal help and being told, sorry, there's no room for you.
Yeah, it really highlights how we as a society, we undervalue these civil legal services.
Right.
They're essential, but they're often treated as an afterthought.
And pro bono work, while certainly admirable, it often feels like a temporary fix, right? It relies on lawyers sacrificing their free time, which is already limited.
Pro bono work is incredibly important, but it's not a sustainable solution to a systemic problem. It's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
And then there's the sheer complexity of the law itself. It's not like we can just hand someone a do-it-yourself legal guide and expect them to navigate, a complicated eviction case or a custody battle.
Exactly. The legal system, by design, is full of this jargon, procedures, and precedents that are difficult to understand without proper training. And for legal aid lawyers and public defenders who are already dealing with these huge caseloads, this complexity adds another layer of difficulty.
Right.
They simply don't have the time to dedicate to each case as they would like.
So it sounds like we have this, a perfect storm brewing, massive need, an overburdened system, dedicated but overwhelmed individuals, and this legal landscape that's just incredibly difficult to navigate without expertise. It can feel a bit hopeless.
It's easy to feel that way, but I think what we're seeing now is a potential turning point, a little flicker of hope emerging from the world of technology.
Yes, intergenerative AI, the tech that's been making waves in everything from art to music. But how does this apply to this very human problem of access to justice?
That's a great question. Generative AI, in simple terms, is a type of artificial intelligence that can create.
Okay.
It's not just about analyzing existing data. It can actually generate new content, like text, images, even code based on the information it's learned.
So we're not talking about robots taking over courtrooms or replacing judges, at least not yet.
Not quite. The real power of generative AI and law lies in its ability to automate tasks, to streamline legal work, and potentially make it more efficient and accessible.
So it's about providing lawyers, legal aid organizations, and even the courts with new tools that kind of amplify their impact.
Precisely. It's about empowering people, not replacing them. Think of it as a force multiplier in the fight for a fairer legal system.
Now, that's what I call an exciting prospect. So let's dive into some specific examples. How is this actually playing out in the real world? What are some of the ways generative AI is being used to tackle these challenges that we've been discussing?
Well, one area where we're seeing some really incredible results is in legal aid, which, as we talked about, is constantly trying to meet these huge demands with very limited resources.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating pilot program happening in San Bernardino, California, where they're using AI to help with eviction cases.
Oh, tell me about that. I had read something about them, using AI to really increase their capacity to handle those cases.
Yeah, that's right. They've implemented systems that use AI for intake and to help draft legal documents, and the impact has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
They went from handling about 2,500 eviction cases a year to over 8,000.
That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
What's so innovative about the way they're using AI?
Well, by automating those initial steps, gathering information from clients and drafting those basic documents, their staff can now focus on the more complex aspects of each case. So the technology is handling the routine, and the humans are focusing on the parts that require empathy, strategy, and, nuanced legal thinking.
It's like having this tireless assistant who's always ready to tackle those tedious parts of the job, And I imagine this approach could be applied to other areas of law as well, not just eviction cases.
You're absolutely right, and it's not just happening in California. Nevada, for example, launched a multilingual chatbot to help people navigate the legal system.
That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, they created this online self-help portal with a chatbot that supports over 50 languages.
Wow.
It's accessible 24/7, which is incredibly helpful for people who might live far from a legal aid office or can't access help during, traditional business hours.
It's like having a virtual legal aid clinic right in your pocket. And I bet it's especially helpful for people who might not feel comfortable seeking help in person.
Exactly. It removes barriers and makes legal information and guidance much more accessible. And let's not forget about the possibilities in criminal justice. Remember how we talked about the heavy workloads of public defenders?
Right.
Well, there's a case where an Innocence Project team used AI to analyze evidence, and it saved them hundreds of hours of manual review.
Wow. So AI could potentially help uncover wrongful convictions faster, especially when you're dealing with just mountains of evidence. That's powerful.
It really highlights how AI can process information at a speed and scale that humans just can't match. It's not just about efficiency, it's about opening doors that were previously closed.
This is all so exciting, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. Can't wait to explore more specific use cases in our next segment. So we were just talking about some pretty remarkable examples of how AI is already making a difference in access to justice. And I'm especially interested in how AI is being used to handle these really time-consuming tasks that lawyers often face, particularly in areas like legal aid or public defense.
Yeah, that's a great point. One area where AI is proving incredibly valuable is in document analysis and summarization. Think about there's just massive amounts of paperwork that lawyers have to sift through, trial transcripts, discovery documents, legal research. It can be really daunting.
Yeah, it's not exactly the most glamorous part of the job, and I can only imagine how time-consuming it must be, especially when you have a huge caseload.
Incredibly time consuming, but AI can be trained to scan these documents, pull out key information, and even create really concise summaries. And that saves lawyers countless hours they would have spent, manually reviewing everything.
It's like having a super-powered research assistant who never sleeps and never misses a detail.
Right.
So all that freed up time could then be used to focus on the more strategic aspects of a case, right?
Exactly. Lawyers can spend more time strategizing, building relationships with clients, crafting arguments instead of getting bogged down in paperwork. There's a great example of this with an Innocence Project team. They used AI to help review hundreds of pages of witness statements, and it was able to identify inconsistencies that would have been incredibly difficult and time-consuming for a human to catch.
It's amazing how AI can sometimes pick up on those subtle details that might be easily missed by the human eye. It's not just about speed, it's about uncovering insights that could potentially change the outcome of a case.
And in that case, those inconsistencies ended up being crucial in their efforts to support a post-conviction relief motion. So it really shows the potential impact of AI in uncovering new information and potentially leading to more just outcomes. And it's not just limited to analyzing existing documents. AI can also be used to help draft legal documents and conduct legal research.
Wow, so we're talking about AI that can actually write legal briefs and motions. It's like something out of a science fiction movie.
It's not quite that dramatic, but it is pretty close. Generative AI can create initial drafts of these documents, pulling in relevant case law statutes, legal arguments based on the specifics of the case. Of course, these drafts would always be reviewed and finalized by a human lawyer.
Right, so it's more like giving lawyers a helpful starting point, a kind of framework that can save them a lot of time and energy.
That's a great way to put it. It's about augmenting human capabilities, not replacing them. Imagine a pro bono attorney who only has a limited amount of time to devote to a case. Having an AI tool that can generate a first draft of a motion could make a huge difference.
Yeah, they could then use their expertise to refine the arguments, double-check the citations, and really tailor the document to their client's specific needs.
Exactly. It's all about maximizing efficiency and impact. And I think this could be a game changer for legal aid organizations, allowing them to serve more clients and handle more complex cases with their limited resources.
And then there's this whole area of client intake and guidance, which can often be a confusing and intimidating process for people who are unfamiliar with the legal system. So how can AI help simplify that initial step?
Well, think about how user-friendly chatbots have become. Imagine an AI-powered chatbot that's available 204/7, guiding people through a series of questions to understand their situation and then connecting them to the right resources or even helping them fill out basic
It's
forms.
like having this virtual legal navigator available anytime, anywhere to help people take those first steps. That could be incredibly empowering, especially for those who might feel intimidated by the formal legal process.
We're even seeing AI being used to break down language barriers, which is another significant hurdle for many seeking legal help.
That's a critical point. Trying to navigate a complex legal issue is challenging enough without the added stress of doing it in a language you don't fully understand.
Exactly. Imagine the relief of being able to access legal information in your native language. AI-powered translation tools can convert legal documents into plain language and translate them into multiple languages, making information more accessible to non-native speakers.
So it's all about empowering individuals, giving them the tools and knowledge they need to understand their options and advocate for themselves.
And let's not forget about all those behind-the-scenes tasks that often take up a lot of time and energy in any legal practice. AI can be used to automate things like scheduling appointments, sending reminders, managing case files, even helping with things like grant writing or reporting.
All those administrative tasks that can bog down even the most deficient legal team.
Yeah.
So freeing up that time could allow them to focus more on direct client service and, actually providing legal advice.
Exactly. And the exciting part is that we're seeing this innovation happening not just in law firms and legal aid organizations, but also in the courts
Oh,
themselves.
that's interesting. What does that look like? Are you talking robot judges?
Not quite yet, but some courts are integrating AI-powered chatbots to guide people through processes like filing forms or responding to a lawsuit.
It's about simplifying the process, making it less daunting, and giving people more control over their own legal matters.
Right, and some courts are even experimenting with online platforms for dispute resolution, where AI can facilitate negotiation and help parties reach a resolution without going through a full-blown trial.
It's fascinating to see how AI is being used to make the legal system more user-friendly and accessible. It feels like we're at this pivotal moment with technology offering the potential to reshape how we approach access to justice.
It's a very exciting time. We're seeing how AI can empower both legal professionals and the public, and I think that's where the real potential lies.
It's a powerful vision,
Mm.
but as with any new technology, it's important to consider the potential downsides as well. We need to be mindful of how AI is developed and deployed, ensuring it doesn't create new problems while trying to solve old ones.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's a great segue into our next segment, where we'll delve into some of the challenges and ethical considerations surrounding the use of AI in law.
Stay tuned because we'll be exploring those very questions right after this. Welcome back to the deep dive before the break. We were talking about some pretty amazing ways AI is already helping to make the legal system, more accessible. But as with any powerful tool, it's important to consider the potential downsides as well, right? Like we need to make sure that AI is being used responsibly and that it truly benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point as we kind of navigate this new frontier of AI in law. It's essential to be aware of the potential pitfalls and to proceed with, a lot of thoughtful consideration.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads with this incredible technology that offers so much potential for positive change, but also raises some important questions. So what are some of the concerns that we should be thinking about as we move forward with this?
Well, one concern is the potential for what I call the automation trap. It's tempting to think that we can just automate every aspect of the legal system, let the algorithms handle everything,
Right.
but that would be a mistake.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new technology and forget that the legal profession is ultimately about people. It's about understanding human needs, advocating for individual rights, navigating those complex ethical dilemmas.
Exactly. The human element is indispensable. The legal system is built on concepts like fairness, justice, empathy, which are deeply rooted in human values and experience.
So it's not about pitting lawyers against AI. It's about finding ways for them to work together effectively.
Precisely. I believe the legal professionals who are really going to thrive in this evolving landscape are those who embrace AI as a powerful tool, using it to augment their skills and expand their reach. It's about creating a synergy between human expertise and those technological capabilities.
It makes a lot of sense. It's like a partnership with each side, bringing its unique strengths to the table.
Think of it as a collaboration where AI handles those repetitive, time-consuming tasks, freeing up lawyers to focus on the strategic, nuanced aspects of each case. Those elements that require human judgment and understanding.
That's exciting to imagine how this partnership could really transform the legal profession. make it more efficient, but also more accessible to those who need it most. And it also highlights the need for education and training, right? Like we need to prepare law students and practicing lawyers to effectively use these new AI tools.
You're absolutely right. We need to integrate AI education into law schools, offer continuing education courses for practicing lawyers, and develop resources that help legal professionals understand how to ethically and responsibly integrate AI into their work.
It's not just about, teaching lawyers how to use a specific software algorithm. It's about fostering a deeper understanding of how AI works, its limitations, and its potential impact on the practice of law.
And it's not just about training lawyers. We also need to educate the public about AI in law, to demystify it, to address concerns, and to ensure that people understand its potential to really increase access to justice.
It's about building that trust and transparency, so people need to feel confident that these AI systems are being used fairly and ethically.
Transparency is key. We need to be open about the limitations of AI, acknowledging that it's not a magic solution, and that human oversight is still crucial. We need to set realistic expectations, be upfront about the challenges, but also highlight the incredible potential that AI holds.
And if we approach this thoughtfully and responsibly, AI has the potential to truly revolutionize the legal system, make it more efficient, more equitable, and more accessible to everyone, regardless of their background or resources.
It's an exciting time to be working in this field. We're witnessing a transformation that could fundamentally change how we think about access to justice, and it's up to all of us lawyers, technologists, policymakers, and the public to shape this future and ensure that it benefits everyone.
It's a call to action for all of us to, engage in this important conversation, stay informed, and advocate for the responsible development and deployment of AI in the legal system.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you today, and I encourage everyone listening to stay curious, ask questions, and continue to explore this fascinating and rapidly evolving field.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of AI and its potential to really reshape the legal landscape. We hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and provided some insights into the exciting possibilities that lie ahead. Until next time.